Peace and blessings, family. This is your brother asarimhotep with the Mandela Institute for the Advancement of Science and Culture. Today we have a very, very, very special guest, all the way from South Africa, Dr. Zulumathabo Zulu, who is a health practitioner doctor, also a computer scientist, historian, and poet. And we're going to cover a lot about his life, the work that he's doing, and the publications that he currently has and will be working on in the near future. So we have a lot to cover. I know that you're going to enjoy this. We have a very powerful guest. So we'll be back with more in just a moment. Yes. Welcome back. Just a couple of announcements first. First and foremost, we have our Patreon page. And so if you are not currently a member of Patreon and this particular page, I encourage you to support the channel and support the upcoming documentary film titled China Into, where we will explore the relationship between, ancient Egyptian society, philosophy, language, with that of modern Bantu speakers throughout Central and South Africa. And so you can support this endeavor by going to patreon.com/asarimhotep. That is patreon.com/asarimhotep. And so you can get a number of gifts and things for supporting. And so all of the details are going to be there. And of course, always, if you want to support the works that I have published, for example, I don't know if y'all can see the Comparative Dictionary of Chicam in Modern African Languages, as well as Aluja Volume 2, China Into Religion and Philosophy. These two texts, actually there's three texts. The other one is Nesubiti, King in Ancient Egyptian. The documentary film will be based upon these texts. So you can support the film also by getting the text. And so now that I got that out of the way, and hope everyone is doing good, if you are not a member of this channel, please hit the subscribe button and make sure that you hit the bell. So every time I upload a video or I do a live, you will be the first to get the notice, and you can be up on all the latest information and get to know some of these powerful guests who I bring on the program, or even the lectures that we do on this channel. And so we're working our way up to 10,000 subscribers. So for those of you who are not subscribers to this channel, please like, share, and subscribe. And so we can, defeat the algorithms and mess all up with the digitization of things. And, more and more people will know about this channel and, of course, our special guests. And speaking of special guests, I want to bring in, all the way from South Africa, aka Azania. It is early in the morning where our guest is located, and it is very, very late at night over here. And so it's a 7 and 8 hour time difference between the East Coast and Central and South Africa. And so I'm lucky to get this guest on at the moment. So I want everyone to welcome Dr. Zulumathabo Zulu. How are you doing, sir?
Oh, thank you very much. Very well, thanks. And also greetings to your audience.
Appreciate
and
it.
I'm very excited about this opportunity to be invited to your show. So it is highly appreciated.
Indeed, indeed. The pleasure is all mine. You come as, a few guests that I've had on from South Africa, and I plan on having some more because I really want people to get to know the cultures and the language and the history and just the people who, of course, all of South Africa, I mean, all of Africa in general, but especially in South Africa. And many people may not know that even though it's not Southern, it's still kind of Southern Africa in Mozambique and Madagascar. Some of our ancestors in the diaspora came from those areas and are related to those people in Zimbabwe and Azania and things of that nature. And, so a lot of people look, of course, rightfully so, to West Africa and not understanding that there's a connection between, African Americans, Afro Brazilians, and, Afro Londoners with people in Southern and Southeast Africa as well. So I appreciate, again, you taking the time out to have this conversation with me and my audience and to learn more about the kind of work that you're doing, in relationship and context to the people who you represent. So with that said, since you are new to this channel, at least, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where were you born? I know a little bit about, your story, but, your travels, across seas and, the education, the exile, all of that. If you could just give us a little bit about that, and then, we'll kind of go into, how you got into the healing work that you do or whatnot. So if we can go there.
Okay, thank you very much.
No problem.
So I was born in South Africa, Azania, the land of Azania. Maybe just before I get into that, just the name of the country. So I use the name Azania quite a lot because the name South Africa is actually a colonial name. It actually referred to a colony and of the Dutch descendants. It was actually called ZAR, which meant Zuid-Afrikaans Republic. So unfortunately, we haven't really done much to rename the country. So I'm one of those people who's promoting that. Okay, so I was born in South Africa, the land of Azania. And by the way, Azania refers to the ocean, what is today known as the Indian Ocean. It used to be called the Azanian Sea. So there is that connection. And of course, we have one of the largest coasts actually of the ocean, both what is today known as the Indian Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean. So I was born in a province called Gauteng, which is in Johannesburg. My father is Zulu, so his family, they are from KwaZulu-Natal province. That's what is called today, KwaZulu-Natal province. And then my mother is a Msotho, and then she comes from a province called Free State province. So, and then from there, of course, basically my father and mother, they, like my mother left the Free State as a young girl, came to Johannesburg in search of gold, because Johannesburg is the city of gold. And so my father was also searching for gold. They never found the gold, but I became the gold. So and
Indeed.
they got stuck with this gold.
Well, they found each
Sure.
other. That's the goal.
Absolutely,
It,
that is the gold.
it,
Absolutely. And so and then my mother. Now maybe let me just make another point.
all
I
right.
actually have two mothers. So
Okay.
I have a biological mother. I'm named after her. So her name is Matabo. So Zulumathabo. So I'm named after her. That's my biological mother.
Mm,
But then, because she also came, of course, from the Free State, and then at some point we got separated at a very young age. Maybe I may have been around, maybe 3, 4 years old, something like that.
mm,
So she was jailed by the apartheid government, and
mm,
then so we got really separated in that way. So then I became adopted to my other family member, who is Madisebo Moloi. So that's the mother. The adoptive mother is the mother that really raised me.
mm,
So I've got two mothers in that way, in that sense. Okay, so my mother, adoptive mother, then died when I was 12, and then I had to go to the Free State to go and live in the Free State. My father didn't raise me, so I was raised by my mother. Now, what's interesting about the African family is that they have an extended family system. So
mm,
that means, we've got many generations, in the same homestead. You've got uncles. There's never an orphan in an African family, especially the
mm.
traditional African family. Things might
Yeah.
be a bit different today because there is the erosion of the African family in a very rapid way. But at least at the time that I was growing up, I grew up in an extended African family. So a loss of your mother or a loss of your father did not have an impact on your socialization experience, for example. And maybe
Mm,
another point to make is that the Basotho have a very interesting social philosophy, and that is when a child is born, that child does not belong to the biological parents. That child belongs to the clan. So that's
mm,
how it works. They even have, ceremonies that they perform to remind the mother that, by the way, you're carrying this child for us. And then once the child is born, that child is now taken care of by the clan. So if anything happens, to the mother or the father, it has no impact on the child because the child is protected by this cultural safety net of the clan. So I think that's a very important point to make. Of course, we are losing that today. And in fact, we have lost a lot of ground in terms of that. And it is one of my missions to resuscitate that. Okay, so and one example of that is that my family in the Free State, my uncle used to go out to hunt for snakes, not to kill them or harm them anyway, but just to catch them and then send them to a game reserve in KwaZulu Natal in Durban. So I grew up
mm,
under that environment. And I remember one time, I was a kid, I was probably around 12 years old, and I saw this baby snake. It was in our yard. And I got so excited about it. I didn't have any fear or anything. I got so excited and actually caught the snake. And
mm,
lo and behold, my uncle was watching me at that point, and he quickly jumped and said, even if it's a baby snake, it can still kill you. So let it go. And then I let go of the snake, of course, and it didn't bite me actually.
mm,
So, and that's just an advantage right there of this extended a clannish family, in the sense that there are many eyes around the child, even if your biological parents may not be there, there's one of the members of the clan that is watching you. So that's an advantage of that. And then also I, was looking after cows there. I had only seen cows on newspapers or books or magazines. I had not actually been up close to a cow. So I got introduced to the cows. We had to milk cows. We milk cows very early in the morning. So we're talking around what, in the wee hours, maybe 4 o'clock in the morning. Around that time, that's how we because to get our food, we need to get the milk, and then we eat milk and porridge, and that was how we used to live. And a cow is a very important thing in that society, meaning a cow is very sacred. In fact, a cow is a god. So the Basotho say a cow is Modimo. So the word Modimo means God. So in a way, we could say that the Basotho are very much similar to the Hindus, of India, who also venerate the cow as sacred. Right. The only difference between the two is that the Hindus are vegetarians, whereas Basotho, they do eat meat, but Basotho will never slaughter a cow for food. They never do that. I'm over 50 years old right now. I've never seen, the Basotho, or even any African for that matter, in the land of Azania, slaughtering a cow or slaughtering a goat or slaughtering a sheep for food. They don't do that. If they slaughter a cow, it is for the gods. And then they will make an offering to the gods. And then the gods will say, okay, you can now eat what remains. So that's how they get to eat. So they don't have the concept of a butchery or abattoir, because that is not for the gods. So although things have changed now, they do go to the butchery and buy meat to go and cook, but that's sacrilege as far as their culture is concerned. And that's one of the things we are working hard to revive, to resuscitate that. Okay. And then I had a very challenging childhood. For example, I can recall that, I was looking after cows and so forth. And then a lot of my siblings were going to school. There was a school there in the village. I was the only one who was not going to school. And then I remember saying to my uncle, saying that, look at the kraal. The kraal now is the pen. The pen is full of cows, because we have done a great job. Cows, goats, sheep, and so forth. Then I said to him, money is not important for me, but there's one thing you can do for me, and that is to take me to school. And he responded by saying that, well, we do not have money to take you to school. And this was, of course, like a shock to me, because I really loved school. I loved knowledge. I loved education. Especially I loved mathematics. That was my favorite subject, So, but then, as time progressed, I then left that particular village and went to a particular place called Kwakwa, which was like Kwakwa, yes. So Kwakwa, it was a homeland, like a reserve. You know how in North America you've got the Indian reservations, right?
Yes.
Exactly. So Kwakwa, it was a reservation like that. And maybe a side note here, and that is the architect of apartheid was somebody called Dr. Verwoerd. So Hendrik Verwoerd is the architect of apartheid. And he did his PhD in psychology in North America. And he got this idea of reservation from there. And so that's how it was implemented in South Africa. So he took a page from how the Aboriginal, Indian reserves were created. Anyways, so I grew up there. Yeah,
not
go ahead.
not to cut you off, but it's
Sure.
interesting that uh, because Hitler, when his form of apartheid in Germany, they studied again America and implemented what the Americans did over there in Germany. They
Interesting.
took it further with the genocide of the Jewish people. But that's just interesting, that little bit of history. I'm sorry. Go
Absolutely.
ahead.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for making that point.
Okay.
So that means that apartheid. Well, something interesting also about apartheid.
Uh-huh.
People always associate apartheid with the Dutch descendants. The people
Yeah.
who are called today Afrikaners. But actually, they are not the architects, the designers of apartheid laws. The apartheid laws were actually created by the English. That's interesting, you see.
Mm. Yeah.
For example, one of the cornerstones of apartheid is what they call pass laws, where you have to carry this pass. It's like an internal passport system, So
Yeah.
when you move from one city or town to another, you have to produce this, and this only applied to the Black Africans. White people didn't have to carry that, and that was created by the English in the 1800s. Whereas apartheid officially starts in 1948. You see, another infrastructural component of apartheid is what is known as Sexual Immorality Act, which says that there can be no sexual contact or intercourse between a white woman and a black man. That was not created by the Dutch descendants. That was created by the English.
So,
King George is the one who ratified that.
quick question: was that only for the white woman and black man, but there wasn't a rule for the white man with a black woman?
Well, that's quite
Or was
interesting. But that's quite interesting because the way it was applied and understood, it was specifically for white women and a black man. That was supposed to be taboo. Now, even a white man with a black woman, that was not allowed. But it happened anyways. We've got people in South Africa who are known as, they are called colored. So the word colored in South Africa has a different meaning from colored in North America. So colored in South Africa means a mixed race. So it's quite incredible that this mixed race thing was happening. It was happening what we would call, through rape, sexual rape, because it was forced, but the real one that was not allowed, they could shoot you on sight for that, and that was a black man having sex with a white woman. That was like unthinkable. And I think it's interesting when you read, writers, philosophers like Frantz Fanon in his book Black Skin, White Masks. I mean, the whole book really, he talks about racism, but the thesis there is that racism is about sex. If you want to understand the causality of racism, you need to understand the concept of sex. That's what it is about. Because, Frantz Fanon says that a white man perceives a black man as a biological threat because of the physical prowess of the black man. So this idea of white woman, black man, that was like a no-no. Of course, one of the great African American scholars, psychiatrist, philosopher, Welsing, Frances Welsing, she takes it further to actually look at it at what she refers to as a recessive gene. that a white man is not capable of passing his phenotype of to the next generation if he has got a baby with let's say a black woman, for example, whereas a black man is able to pass the phenotype, and this becomes, and she explains that this is the reason why there is this racism and stuff like that. So this whole idea of sex for apartheid government was a very big thing, was a very, very big thing. Okay. And then, so I moved, as I said, to this place called Qwaqwa, which was a reservation modeled after the American Indian reservation system. And then I then studied there actually by correspondence, because I didn't have money to go to school, so I started learning, teaching myself. I actually became a self-educated person, and then did these correspondence courses, completed my high school, and then completed a college diploma in journalism and professional writing. That was 1984. And then from there, I got hired by the South African Broadcasting Corporation, SABC TV News, and then that was 1985. So I became a TV journalist then. So that's when my life changed, at that point. And of course, but that was during the height of apartheid. So the apartheid government was very sensitive to any stories that were not to the liking of the ruling powers, or stories that were kind of rubbing the authorities the wrong way. So as a result, I then went into exile in 1987, and I went to Botswana. And then I was in Botswana in the ANC camp. I was there for 2 years. Then I got a scholarship to go and study engineering in Germany. But then I decided not to take the scholarship, because what that meant is that after I graduate in Germany, I would have to come back to Botswana, and I didn't want to come back. So then I immigrated to Canada. That was 1989. So that's where I was. Sorry, I was just going to ask you if we can take a short break.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hold on 1 second.
Thank you.
Yeah. I don't know why this thing isn't. There we go.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll come back. I just want to, I need to take care of something here.
All right, no problem, no problem.
Thank you.
Let me do this real quick. So yes, for those of you who are listening, he's kind of laid out, and we know that in the African way it's a roundabout, but you got to get the full context in terms of his location, the time in which he was born. So keep in mind, he said he's over 50, and the apartheid architecture really begins in 1948. So he's born in the midst of this type of government, and you can see the kind of effects that it has. And so he mentioned briefly about the separation of his family because of the parents protesting, and the mother getting arrested. And not sure if he mentioned what happened to the father, but him having to go to extended relatives, to live, and where he grew up, most of that time. So there's the breaking up of the families, but at the same time, as you also heard him, the way that the family structure was indigenously designed, the support system was still there, even if something happened, to the parents. And as he mentioned, there's no such thing as an orphan, indigenously at least. And so it's some very powerful information here. And then, of course, the idea that some individuals went to America and looked at the Indian reservation system and decided to implement that as a social strategy, and a social oppressive strategy for native South Africans. And so this is this is instructive, and how they Europeans are learning from each other and implementing these various ideas uh, to the detriment of African people. And so this is very important work. Excuse me, this is a very important story that you're getting firsthand, that you can kind of understand a bit, what people were going through there. And you will find that there's some symmetry in the way that Africans were being treated in South Africa or Azania, and how African Americans, Afro Brazilians, Afro Cubans, et cetera, et cetera. There's a commonality in terms of experience with Europeans. And so our guest has made it back. And there you go. I'm just having a brief conversation with the audience and waiting for your return. So I appreciate, again, you telling this story, and what reminds me, what your story reminds me of a little bit. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the author. He was also a journalist who published a work in 1979 out of South Africa titled "Conflict of Minds." Jordan Ngubane.
Yes,
Are
yes,
you
yes.
familiar with it?
Yes,
Yeah.
Ngubane. Yeah. Yes.
He was exiled for his writings, and he ended up in Nigeria for a little while. I think he visited Ghana, and then he ended up in the United States. And one of my old professors met him in Philadelphia when he came, here. So he was teaching a little bit in Philadelphia in the late, or excuse me, in the late 70s, early 80s. And so that's y'all having that journalism background, and then being exiled, after that, and then coming, say here to the United States. But that's one of my favorite authors, ever, in terms of just ever, but especially, of course, of African, like I put him there with Diop, Du Bois, and things of this nature, especially because he gives us some insight into Zulu philosophy, Zulu cosmology, and how all of that shapes the difference in thinking and the conflict inevitable between the Europeans and the Nguni, what he would call the Nguni people, in Azania. And so, but if you had more on that point, I'll let you continue before I ask my next question.
Okay, thanks a lot. Yes.
Yeah, no problem.
So then, as I and absolutely, cosmology is very critical in African culture, African civilization. In fact, one of the books that I've written called "The Sacred Knowledge of the Desert: African Philosophical Transcendence." There's a section where I talk about. Thank you very much. Yes, that is the book. Yes, we give thanks.
I was going to ask you about this book. Go ahead.
Okay, sure.
Okay,
but I just wanted to say, just in passing, that so cosmology is we talk about Genesis, because the Africans trace their Genesis to the cosmos. So so now coming back to when I said that I was in exile, so I left Botswana to go to Canada, and that was 1989. And so it's quite interesting. When I was in Canada, I had a brief stint as a news reporter, for a local newspaper there. But then I went and studied geriatric nursing. geriatric nursing assistant to work in, geriatric institutions. And that was an extremely interesting and revealing experience for me, because while I worked there to, build some finances to go to university, but I also got to do some ad hoc experiment. In fact, in one of my articles on my blog called The Anti-Black Man Sentiment, somewhere there I refer to the water glass experiment, because I developed this hypothesis that, intellectual performance is very much dependent on the function of the chemistry of the neuromelanin, and so what I did was I had to come up with this very simple experiment, and basically it was the use of a glass with water. So, and my hypothesis was that, if I give this glass to an aged white Canadian, and if this water, shakes or gets spilled, that means there's a problem with the neuromelanin function, And then if the glass is stable, and there's no shaking on the surface of the water in the glass, then that means that the chemistry of the neuromelanin is working very well. And that was quite interesting, because a lot of African Canadian people in those institutions, for the most part, you give them, this glass of water, the glass of water is stable. There's no shaking on the surface of the water, you see. And for me, that was how I was able to establish a connection between, intellectual performance and neuromelanin. So, so that was an experience that I got out of that geriatric nursing. And then from there, of course, I went to study computer science and mathematics, at two universities. One is Algonquin College of Applied Arts and Technology. It's in Ottawa, Ottawa being, of course, the capital city of Canada. And also went to do advanced engineering, software engineering courses at Carleton University. And then from there, I then did a postgraduate certificate in object-oriented analysis and design. So, and then from there, I worked as a software engineer for more than 20 years. And one of the companies I worked for was a company called NCR. NCR is the company that makes ATM bank machines. When you are on an ATM machine, you will see the NCR there. So I designed forensic software for them, for example. And then I also designed the graphics engine for Google in San Francisco, because the company that I worked for in Ottawa, which was called Edscape Media, it got acquired by Google. So that's how that is the connection between the two. And then I did a number of these. I've always been very much interested in graphics, design, engineering has always been of interest to me, because what's interesting about mathematics and graphics is that graphics is very much mathematical. And then number two, graphics gives you an immediate output. So if I draw a rectangle, I'm gonna see it, so I get my reward right away. Whereas when you are designing other things like the client server or something like that, you don't see your results right away. But you're doing something. It is only at that point when you start testing, then you get to see that, okay, this thing is doing this. Most of the work is behind the scenes, but graphics is an instant gratification. So I've always been fascinated by that. Okay, so and then from there, around towards the end of I think it was around 2008. Yeah, 2008, 2009, went to Cuba, I came back, and then 2010, I decided to come back to South Africa. I can recall I caught a bus. I took a bus, Greyhound bus from Toronto, and it goes overnight via Buffalo to New York. And then I got a taxi from there to John F. Kennedy International Airport, and then boarded the South African Airlines. I think it's about 17 hours flight over the Atlantic, which has always been the great divide for me between my homeland and Canada. So I landed here in South Africa in 2010. And then in 2013, that's when I began to study, enter this Basotho doctoral school to learn about indigenous medicine plants. So that was my interest. So I completed that in 2017. See, completed a doctoral dissertation in that. So and that's what I do. It's very interesting that the Africans actually, especially in matters of therapeutics, in matters of etiology, the causality of disease, their philosophy of what causes disease is quite interesting because you'll find that Africans have always been ahead of the Europeans. For example, in the 1800s, England did not have a cure for tuberculosis. And then the historical account of a British citizen by the name of, Henry Stevens, who was suffering from tuberculosis. And then the doctor said to him that, we don't have a cure for this disease, but I would recommend that you go to South Africa. Apparently, you might get cured today. We have heard some good things about them. And actually, that's what happens. Henry Stevens comes to South Africa, the land of Azania, and he gets introduced to a doctor who's trained in indigenous medicine. And then he undergoes treatment, and he gets cured of tuberculosis. At that point, Europe doesn't have a cure for tuberculosis. And then he goes back to England, and he goes back to the same doctor. And he tells the doctor, "Doctor, I'm cured." The doctor runs tests and says, "Yes, there is no tuberculosis anymore in you." How did they do it? You see. So that's just one example that the Africans have always been very much advanced. And there are many examples. For example, the antibiotic tetracycline. When you do Google tetracycline, it will take you to Pfizer and tell you that Pfizer, owns a patent that was issued to Pfizer in 1952. But actually, Pfizer is not the inventor of tetracycline. The Africans are the inventors of tetracycline. Africans have been using tetracycline for more than 1,000 years. And there's a number of scientific papers in peer-reviewed journals that attest to the fact. So basically, Pfizer should not have been issued a patent on tetracycline because the rules. I own a number of intellectual property certificates issued to me by the federal government of Canada for the inventions that I have made. And the rules, they have this rule called prior art, which says that you cannot be issued an intellectual property certificate for something that has already been invented, unless you are innovating new features of that existing invention. And
so you couldn't get a patent on sliced bread.
Exactly.
Because sliced bread is already invented before the whole idea of patents. Exactly. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Unless there's a new feature about this sliced bread, So basically that's what it is. And And there's a number of them. For example, you look at medicines like aspirin, for example. Aspirin is from an African medicine plant. Africans use this tree called willow tree. They use willow tree as for analgesics and stuff like that. And Europeans took that knowledge and without giving Africans a credit. And when you do Google about that, you're going to find that it is associated with some European chemists, that sort of stuff. And also in the area of mathematics, for example, in the 1400s, that's 15th century, believe it or not, Europeans did not know how to multiply and divide. That's interesting. They could only do addition and subtraction. And remember that the 15th century, that was the time of the Enlightenment, and the Renaissance, right? That was supposed to be the intellectual, enlightenment, but they couldn't do that. And there is a historical account of a German merchant who goes to this German university professor seeking advice about the best university for his son to learn, business studies. And the German professor says to the merchant that, our university can only do addition and subtraction. So I would recommend that your son should do business studies in Italy. And then the question is, why Italy? Well, that's because there is a mathematician in Italy by the name of Fibonacci. So the father of Fibonacci was an ambassador of Italy to Africa. And then while he was an ambassador there, Fibonacci was a boy. And he was studying and learning mathematics there. He was taught by the Berbers. And he would tell his father that, hey, these people have got the kind of mathematics that we don't have. And then the father encouraged him, to pursue that. And eventually he wrote a book. And in this book he explains that up until now, the Europeans have been without this mathematical knowledge. And he says he's writing it down so that they should not be found to be without this knowledge. So there's a lot of contributions that Africa have made to, European civilization. And I have a great interest in mathematics myself because if you look at the language of the African language, especially the Basotho on my mother's side, notice that their language uses a lot of numerical logic, for example. If a woman is going to put on a headscarf, they use the word tata, right? And the word tata means is a mathematical concept. It means to form into a round mass or to form a ring. You see, so it's quite interesting. But they use these another one. If they give directions, they will say, follow latela motati watava, meaning follow the graphical sequence of the mountain. If you're going to pass next to a mountain. So they conceptualize about, the word mutati describes a graph. So they conceptualize about a mountain as a graph or a river as a graph. And they are saying to you, follow the graphical sequence of the river or of the mountain. And what's interesting is that this language, you don't have to be conscious about mathematics. It's just a natural part. It's an intrinsic part of the language. Is a design feature. Is a facility within the language. In Canada, the English language has got separation from mathematical concepts. If, for example, you were saying something like, if we were to use a word and say, I would like to look at the graph of this river. Canadians would say, but you are being mathematical now, because it's not the mathematics is distinct from the actual everyday language. But with the Africans, mathematics is part of the language. You can even see it in terms of, let's look at something like geometric shapes, like a triangle.
Mm-hmm.
So in a Western society, a triangle is a geometric shape. You can use it artistically and stuff like that. But there's nothing more to a triangle. Well, among the Africans, a triangle is actually a calculator, believe it or not. Yeah, just a triangle, you can perform very impressive mathematical calculations with a triangle. And I can do it for you. And they use sticks. So these sticks would be perpendicular to each other, you see. And then you can calculate, you can do all kinds of stuff. And then, so in other words, a triangle among the Basotho and other Africans has got intelligence, because you can do stuff. It can do stuff. In a Western society, a triangle does not have intelligence. It's just a geometric shape. That's just one of those examples. It's very interesting, even in terms of, for example, they use rocks, for example, as a calculator. And if you analyze the algorithm, the way they compute, is very interesting. It's very innovative. So, for example, in our normal mathematics, if they will give you a problem to solve, let's say multiplication problem, something like 9 times 9, for example. So you would write the number 9, and then you would put the operator X for the times, and then you would put the 9, right? And then you would work it out to get the answer. Well, the Basotho, and like other Africans, they can actually compute that problem without even the use of the operator. How about that?
It reminds me of even in ancient Egypt, like there's a word hased, meaning to count, to think, or whatnot, but it comes from a root meaning stone, rocks.
Yeah,
and so you can see it in that context, and it was borrowed into Semitic.
And thanks for bringing that up, because there is that strong connection between the Azanians here in Azania and the Kemet. Even in the language, even the things they do. You can even see even the way they create, the architecture. A lot of the roofing of the house is a pyramidal shape. It's done in a pyramidal shape. And also the cosmos has got a big influence on that. And this idea of rocks is very powerful, because I have a great interest in biological science, particularly an enzyme. I'm very fascinated by an enzyme. For some reason, I think the enzyme is one of the greatest things, one of the most intelligent things that exist. For example, if we didn't have an enzyme, we would be very slow to breathe. We would be very slow to speak. We wouldn't even survive, actually. But with an enzyme, things are quite, they are the way they should be. But what's interesting is that you look at a molecule, it has to do something, and it will take a certain length of time for it to do something, to do that kind of work. But an enzyme can shorten the time it takes for that molecule to do, right? So I've always been fascinated by this. Now, you see those stones, I'm actually using those stones to understand how the enzyme works. How about that? How about
Mm.
that? It's very, very interesting. And
I want
and these stones are quite sophisticated. Yeah, go ahead.
no. I was just gonna say that we have to definitely bring you back to so you can show us
Yes.
that relationship, saying between the two. But I wanted to ask you before you moved on, again, as I've mentioned at the beginning of the program in terms of the relationship between ancient Egypt and modern Bantu speaking, and I know to a certain extent in South Africa the word Bantu has, been made into a pejorative by Europeans. But I'm just strictly speaking upon the language group from a linguistic standpoint. Uh, Group of people, the ancient Egyptians and modern Bantu speaking people. And one of the things that I've noticed between the two cultures is now this could be the result of trade, um, or just something that was inherent from like a pre-dialectical, ancestral culture or whatnot. But the collars that you see like people wear in South Africa and Zimbabwe in those areas, um, with the multi-colored and layered, like you see the same type of
Mm,
adornment, so to speak, in ancient Kemet that you
mm,
see uh, amongst the various cultures
mm.
in southern and southeastern Africa. And I wanted to ask if you had any knowledge on you know what they're called and if there's any special significance to those or different types if there are if you
Okay. The
okay.
colors and
Yes.
the geometric shapes. Yes. Well, it's quite interesting because the for all the ethnic groups in Southern Africa, let's say, red is a predominant color. This is quite
Mm,
interesting, right? You find it in all the designs that they make, and that color come from the earth, from the certain rock, which is known as Letsopa, is also known, I think in English it will be an ochre
yeah.
rock.
Hmm.
And of course, there are different colors. There would be red, there would be yellow, and there would also be white. But it's also interesting that these colors are also linked to their schools, the indigenous schools, for example. When you enter the school, this is what they used to do in the past. They would paint you with a white color, white color on the face, for example.
Hmm.
And then when you graduate from the school, then they would use this red ochre color.
Hmm.
So the white color represents the color of the moon. And the moon, of course, has got these phases, these lunar phases. And these lunar phases, for them, represent the different stages of learning, the different levels of learning, of acquiring the knowledge and stuff like that. And then when you graduate now, when you have completed your training, then they have to use this red ochre color. And that is the color of the sun, the rising of the sun, you see. Yes. So there is that link there. And also there is a cosmologic link in the sense that when a child is born among the Basotho, they don't give the name right away to the child. They have to wait for a certain length of time, And then when the umbilical cord or the belly button, when it falls off from the stomach of the child, then they prepare this particular ritual, which they call a siromo. And this is actually going to be a naming ceremony where they're going to name this child. And then they're going to make sure they're going to look at the lunar calendar. And on that particular day when the child is going to be named, it has to be full moon. So the festivity will start, of course, in the morning, during the day, and so forth, and then sunset. Then that full moon shines, and then they're going to say to the child, in the presence of the village, of the clan, they're going to say, "You see that moon? That moon is." They use the word is your mupato. Mupato actually means classmate. That's quite interesting, you know. Mupato means classmate. And so they'll say, this is your mupato, meaning this moon is your friend, is your schoolmate. You will learn a lot of things from the moon. You see that sort of stuff. Okay, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay,
I may look frozen, but I'm here. I'm
okay,
just doing something.
Yeah, just wanted to show. Yes. Okay.
Because I wanted to put. Hold on one second.
Okay.
To get back to the collar.
Sure.
And I know this is probably just a general word for like collar on his shirt, like in a modern time. So I don't know what they're called, but it's interesting. On the left-hand side, you can see this Egyptian word, khalas.
Okay.
It's a collar type of necklace that I was talking about, that type of collar. And then you have this word in isiZulu, ukololo or okololo, for a collar in terms of.
I'm sorry. Say that Nkulu, you said, or
it's I don't know if you can see it on your screen.
Let's see.
You'll probably be able to pronounce it better than I.
Oh, yes, I see. Ukololo. Oh, I see. Yeah.
Ukololo.
Okay, so you're actually referring to the collar as opposed to the actual color. Is that right?
Well, I don't know, because this could be just English, like an English word, like they're saying the word collar. But I'm wondering if the concept of the collar is an African word itself. And so I'll have to investigate, that. But as far as those kind of necklaces, those collar necklaces, this is one of the names for it in Egyptian. And I wish I had an image to show the people.
Okay.
But
okay. Yes.
Just wanted to get your take.
Sure. I think on the Zulu Sotho side, those necklaces have a lot of meaning. And but also there is a cosmic meaning on those collars, like for example, like a clavicle. There is a bird, for example. Okay, let me backtrack a little bit. If you look at the star systems, what you call the Milky Way. So in Sesotho, the Milky Way is called Molala Tladi. So Molala refers to the neck. You see, Molala refers to the neck, and then Tladi refers to the thunderbolt. You see, the thunderbolt. So basically, they make this connection between, and then there is a bird that has this fused clavicle, and then this particular bird is associated with the Milky Way. In fact, is a thunderbird. Is a thunderbird. So some of those necklaces that they put on here, they are connected to that, to this to this fused, clavicle of this particular bird. There was a big bird called Impundulu, but that bird has become extinct now. And then there is another bird now, which is called, I think it's called hammer bird, because it's like it has got a hammer, almost like a guinea fowl. It's got a hammer. So that bird is believed to be a reincarnation of the one that was extinct, and that is a thunderbird, and is connected with the Milky Way, the star systems. And some of the necklaces that they use will be associated with it. So now I haven't read much about the Egyptian collar systems that they used, so I can't really comment much on that. But at least from the Zulu Sotho side of things, they have this connection between the clavicle of this bird and of course the arms of the Milky Way. Very important, Yeah.
Indeed, I appreciate it. I want to move into briefly 3 of your books.
Okay.
And if you can kind of give us a rundown of what these books are about, and we'll go from there. So I'll bring back the title that you mentioned earlier, and that is The Sacred Knowledge of the Desert, African Philosophical Transcendence. So what is this book about, and what inspired you to write it?
Thanks a lot. Yeah. So this book is about the desert flower as a metaphor for the African philosophy of transcendence. So basically, a desert flower is a very interesting life form, in the sense that it is born in the most inhospitable environment. The constant or periodic water shortage, the killer sun rays, the gusty winds, the dust storms, and also a flower, unlike, let's say, an animal, it is not able to run away from its environment. It is kind of stuck in that environment. And yet the desert flower produces the most beautiful flower. And then you look at that and say, this is quite incredible. This is quite miraculous that this flower, in spite of the harsh conditions of this desert, is still able to produce beauty. So what inspired me really is that I was an exile. I was in exile in Botswana, northern Botswana, under the ANC camp, as previously mentioned. And when I left South Africa, so one of the things that I ran away from, besides the apartheid government, was also to run away from a white God. Because a black child is always, inculcated. They always inculcate these white images, like, for example, an image of a white church, a white school, a white university, a white institution, and also the image of a white God, which makes the child think that a white person is a god. And also the image of a white doll, which means that the most beautiful thing, is a white person. So in one of the articles called A White God, I kind of described this a little bit more. So then while I was there in the camp, in the ANC camp in northern Botswana, in the bush, in the jungle, literally, I got introduced to another white god, And this white god is Karl Marx, and his Bible is Das Kapital. I then, felt that there was no escape from a white god. So I then decided to go to the desert. This is now the Kalahari Desert.
All right.
And then when I was in the desert, it was a very harsh, very dry place. But then, as I was looking around, I saw this fragile plant showing some green. Then I said, "But this plant is very brave to show some green in a very hostile place like this." And then, even though the ground was kind of cracked because of the dryness, you could see the fault lines on the desert. But this flower was hedging its bet on the fact that the rain will eventually come, and hence it was showing some green. So then, for me, that was a life-changing experience. So I then wrote a piece. So the piece that actually the first piece that I wrote out of that experience was a literary piece called Venturesome Kisses, you see. And then of course the contextual commentary is the one that says that the flower waits underground, and then and it's waiting underground for the rain. And it says, when the rain falls, it springs to life, knowing that the rain will soon be gone. So it's quite interesting that the desert flower, when the rain is coming down and it gets rejuvenated, it enjoys the rain, it dances in the breeze, but it doesn't, develop a sense of complacency, because complacency leads to vanity, and it knows the dangers of vanity. So what it does is that it maintains its system of countermeasures against vanity, against complacency. It internalizes the rain that falls, so that when the rain is gone, it can draw from the reserves of the rain that fell. So for me, this was a very powerful metaphor, a very powerful model, that we Africans, we have been subjected to extreme forms of desert conditions. But what was happening is that we were allowing ourselves to be defined by these adverse conditions. And you can even tell, in a normal, mundane conversation, somebody will go on rehashing some bad experience as if life now revolves around that, you see. So whereas the desert flower is able to shake off the funks of, from the desert condition. So that was what inspired me to write this book. And also, I wanted to foreground the philosophy of the African philosophy, because the narrative is that Africans do not have a philosophy. So meaning Africans do not, apply their mind to the pursuit of knowledge. So I felt that, this was an opportunity for me to showcase, to share with the world the African origin of philosophy. And talking about philosophy, it is important to make some contrast here. So Western philosophy is essentially about three things. It's about, existence, and then so we could use the word, metaphysics or ontology to refer to that. And it is also about knowledge, and they use the word epistemology to refer to that. And it is also about the values, and they use the word axiology to refer to that, ethics, beauty, aesthetics, and stuff like that. Now, Basotho philosophy is based on 5 principles. The first one is pair. So pair would mean, life, existence, survivability, sustenance, and then the second principle is tse. Tse means knowing. But what's interesting is that knowing among the Basotho is uh, is philosophically different from knowing in Western society. In Western society, knowing is more about speculative pursuit of knowledge, logic and stuff like that. Among the Basotho, knowing, the word for knowing is actually sensing. So that principle tse actually means sensing. And among the Basotho, sensing is an analog of knowing. You see, it's quite interesting. So, in other words, knowledge for them has to be grounded in reality. So knowing for them is a metaphysical case, as opposed to, an epistemic case. Okay. So I've just given those. Then the number 3 is going to be Ra. So Ra in among the Sutta, of course, it means the god, the sun god Ra, but also Ra means design or arrangement. Remember, I was talking earlier saying that they have this arrangement strategy in their mathematics, where, for example, the use of stones, you can use them to model phenomena. And in my particular case, I'm using these stones to investigate how the enzyme works. Because I'm very fascinated by that. So the Ra would describe that concept of arrangement, design, and of course, when you talk design, we're not talking about engineering, reverse engineering, and so forth. And then principle number 4 is going to be Pa. So Pa is about transcendence, but it is specifically about vertical transcendence. So this can be compared to, the pinnacle of the pyramid. So the pinnacle of the pyramid is about vertical transcendence. It's about resonance, cosmic resonance, about alignment, with the star systems. Okay. And then principle number 5 is Tse, and Tse is lateral transcendence. So it's about extending ourselves, extending ourselves beyond our immediate bloodline, beyond our immediate clan, to transcend ourselves, to make those connections, those lateral connections with other clans, with people that we don't know, people that we don't even share a lot of things in common, but we go out there to learn more about them. And that's how Africans have lived for centuries, for thousands of years. I'll give an example. One of the great leaders of the Basotho is King Moshoeshoe. So King Moshoeshoe was not born a king. He's actually a commoner. He doesn't have the bloodline. But then when he was growing up as a boy, he said he was going to be a king. And so he actually shocked his parents. Because his parents kept on saying to him, but we don't have, royal blood. So how are you going to become a king? And he would say, well, I will be a soldier. I will be a military general. I will defeat nations. And after I defeat them, they will worship me as their king. So eventually they decided to take him to a certain philosopher king known as Moshoeshoe. So when they brought him to Moshoeshoe, then Moshoeshoe asked Moshoeshoe and says, what do you want to be when you grow up? He said, I want to be a king. A king, yes. Do you have any links to royalty in your family? He said, no, I don't have. So how are you going to be king? Well, I'm going to make war. I'm going to defeat the nations. Then Moshoeshoe said, well, if you shed blood, you're not going to become a king, because in order to become a king, people have to love you. So you have to find a different way, so you can become a king through love. Then Moshoeshoe asked, how so? He said, well, you must marry from your enemies. You must get makoti. Now, the word makoti means a daughter-in-law. So you must get makoti from your enemies. And you know something? King Moshoeshoe married, he had more than 140 wives from his enemies. How about that? And he built one of the greatest nations. I'll give an example, practical, case in point. The Zulus lost their land, right? Even today, Zulus lost their land. King Moshoeshoe, they have their land. He never lost his land. He lost part of it, but he still have the what they call Lesotho Mountain Kingdom. You see that? Exactly. And Moshoeshoe, he went to war with the English and the Afrikaners. He defeated the English armies twice, more than twice. And he defeated the Afrikaners as well. It's quite interesting. So he was a great military strategist, but also he was a very brilliant diplomat and pragmatist, you see. I'll give an example. In one of the in one case, the Afrikaners whom he had defeated previously had reorganized themselves, and they were stronger than him. And then he threatened him, and he realized that he didn't stand a chance against the Afrikaners. So what does he do? He goes to the English, and he negotiates with the English for a what you call a protectorate, and then the English used their military resources to preserve his kingdom, and that's how Moshoeshoe survived. You see, so I think coming back to the point that this lateral transcendence is a very powerful principle, and that is one of the reasons why I wrote this book, because I felt that the world needed to know about African philosophy, especially from the Azanians, like the Basotho, for example. So, but it's interesting that in addition to that, the book also traces the history of the calculator, because mathematics is always of great interest to me. So, for example, the calculator in Europe, for example, the calculator that can do 4 operations: addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. It was invented in the 1800s, in the mid 1800s, and it became commercialized in the second half of the 1800s. It was done by a French engineer by the name of Thomas, and that calculator was called Thomas arithmometer, you see. But here is an interesting fact. The Azanians here in South Africa, they had a calculator called Muruba, and this calculator was in existence more than 800 years before the Thomas arithmometer calculator there. And of course, as I already pointed out, there was no way the Europeans could create a calculator when they still didn't know how to multiply and divide. First you need to know how to do that, and then you can then go on to create a calculator. I would like to show you the sample of the Muruba calculator. So I'm just going to move a little bit and get it out of my bag.
All right, no problem.
Thank you.
All right. Then we'll talk about this book, and then we'll talk about this one and wrap up.
That's very good.
Yeah.
Okay. Here is a calculator. I don't know if you can see that.
Yes.
Yes. So I'm going to open it here. Okay. Now the rocks are going to fall. Just wanted to see what it looks like.
Yes.
So those pits, those are the memory cells. Now, a lot of people use this as a game, because you can play a game with it. But besides a game, it's also a very impressive calculator. You can do very interesting. You can do addition, subtraction, division, multiplication on this using pebbles like this. I don't know if you, I'm gonna try to see if you can see some pebbles there. Do you see
I
that?
can see. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's right.
Mm.
And then let me show you another device here. Just gonna show you another device. There's another thing here. You see that?
Yes.
Yes. This is called the ghetto. And then the ghetto uses a principle of a triangle. Remember, I was talking about the triangle,
Yes.
and you can use this to model computation. You can also model phenomena, like for example, causality. If you want to understand what is causality, what creates causality. So,
Mm.
so this system is very powerful to do that. You see. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, we're definitely going to have to revisit those and maybe get a lesson
Oh,
in how
Matabo.
to do that in the future.
Absolutely. In fact, I ran a research institute. Of course, I didn't tell you about my research institute. So I ran, one of the things that I did was to establish a research institute when I came back from Canada, from exile. So I ran an institute, a research institute called Matabo University College. Is a research institute. And then the goal is to establish a school by the same name. So we do a lot of research here. We've been doing lots of research. In fact, we've been doing longitudinal studies in 3 provinces: the province of Free State, where I was a shepherd boy, and also the province of Gauteng, which is where I was born, and also the province of Northwest. Northwest is where I've been doing a lot of teaching there, and I'm still involved there in the supervision of graduate students in the Northwest University there. So in these 3 provinces, I've been doing a lot of, we do a lot of longitudinal studies. As you know, your normal research is a cross-sectional research. You know, if you have a topic, you pursue the topic, you investigate, you write a research report or dissertation, and you're done. So in our case, we wanted to understand the mind of the Black child, to understand the social experience of the Black child, because we feel that in order to emancipate the melanin, in order to release the spirit of the melanin, so that, you know, an African can be an architect of destiny. You see, the unborn, unsold architect of destiny. It's very important to understand the social experience of the Black child, because that will help us to connect the dots and actually come up with tangible scientific solutions, so that we can collaborate, we can work together, you know, develop enterprising culture and so forth. Because culture is extremely important for us. Culture is really the cultural knowledge is the superset of knowledge. You know, if you look at Chinese, for example, they won their independence in 1949. China used to be under Japan. And then about 10 years later, they embarked on the second revolution. They called it the Cultural Revolution, and also the Great Leap Forward. And they even got into an ideological disagreement with the Soviet Union, because the Soviet Union was financing the Chinese Communist Party of Mao Zedong. And China said, because the Soviets were saying that, how can you talk about cultural revolution when you got your political revolution in 1949? So the logical progression is economic revolution. And Mao Zedong, Xiaoping, Chu Enlai, and others, they said, no, China, if Chinese can be inspired by their culture, by their thinkers, by their philosophers, by their language, by their writing systems, by their ancestors, by their elders, China will be the greatest nation on the planet. And today is the case.
Mm.
The power of culture. And culture is very important, right? Because culture controls the mind. And we know, in universities, psychology is the discipline of the mind. It deals with the mind. It investigates the mind, in a scientific way. But I'm going to shock you when I say that
Mm-hmm.
psychology doesn't have the same access to the mind as the culture does. Culture has got more access to the mind than psychology, right? Because psychology is trying to access the mind in an epistemic way, whereas culture gains access to the mind in a metaphysical way. And metaphysics is very powerful. So, for example, listen to the great, hip hop artist. He appears in front of a crowd and he says, "Put your hands in the air." And everybody puts their hands in the air and nobody knows why. And then he says, "Hey, ho, ho." Everybody says, "Whoa, ho." That is power. Why? Because you see, a hip hop artist is a cultural scholar. He's using cultural tools to gain access to the mind. And the culture gives him access to the mind, the heart and mind. But if you take a guy with a PhD in psychology and he appears in front of the crowd and he says to the crowd, "Say ho, ho," they're gonna stone him.
Indeed.
Exactly. So that is the power of cultural knowledge. Yeah.
Yes. Matter of fact, that's part of. I assume you're familiar with the scholar, the African American scholar by the name of Dr. Malana Karenga, who him and his US organization created the cultural national holiday called Kwanzaa.
Oh yes,
And
yes,
yeah,
absolutely. Yes.
so matter of fact, that has always been his argument since the early '60s, is that it's the cultural aspect that we need to revisit. And I'm reminded of another scholar, African American scholar by the name of Dr. Amos Wilson. And he was a psychologist, and business person. And he wrote a text called "The Blueprint for Black Power." It was published 3 years after his death. I think he died in '95, but this was published in '98. And the the first chapter is really kind of the introduction. The second chapter, defines what is power. But the third chapter is culture as the basis of power.
Yeah.
And, they're in their own intellectual ways are discussing the role of culture in terms of, long-term power and how it has to be rooted in the culture of the people. And that and it is those kinds of, along with the works of like Ngubani, Sheikh Hansis Yo, that have allowed me to really understand the power of the cultural piece and why, and maybe we'll talk about that in sometime in the future, why I'm so adamant about, at least for us African Americans, kind of reorganizing and creating culture. And so there's a lot, of course, that we were able to retain here in the United States as a result of the transatlantic slave holocaust. However, we were stripped of our language, which is part of the maintenance of the psychology. Now we were able to keep certain things, but like there were literally laws banning us from practicing, openly our culture. And so we weren't able to keep certain aspects of our culture as strongly as people in like Cuba or people in Brazil, where they still had their own restrictions, but the culture was still allowed to thrive in a certain sense. But so what you're saying regarding the cultural piece is very resonant, with me, because that is kind of the centerpiece of the work that I do and why I even have these type of interviews, so we can get understanding of the underlying nuances of a people's culture, because especially for us in the diaspora, we're trying to at least understand and capture. Even we know that African people are modern people, and they adapt and certain things change, but there's a certain kernel inside of the culture that remains foundational that we can learn from, and you've been kind of reinforcing a lot of those things that we discuss on this channel and in the books that we write and things of this nature here. So I definitely appreciate that. I want to
thank you.
move on to this book, if you can, and I know this one's written uniquely, and I would love for you to tell us what this book is all about, and what inspired you. So go ahead.
Thank you very much. So this is a very interesting book. So the word Kholabuloko is a Sesotho word for a beetle, a dung beetle.
Mm-hmm.
And then African roots of cosmic genesis. So this book is actually a chapter in a bigger book that I'm working on, and which is, of course, about the African origin of cosmology. So what's interesting is that this particular insect is very much legendary within the Basotho cosmology, not just Basotho, all other ethnic groups, actually. So, for example, my biological mother has a name, she belongs to a people called Hadebe. Now,
Hadebe.
Hadebe is Radebe, Hadebe.
Okay.
Yes. Now, it's very interesting that we have the concept of, I suppose, for lack of a better word, called clan names. We have very elaborate system of clan names. So if somebody is, let's say, for example, Hadebe, and then they go into these poetic chronicles of who they are, where they come from, they trace their genealogy, So the Hadebe people, the main clan name they use is called Bungani.
Okay.
Now, the word Bungani refers to the beetle. That's interesting. And somewhere in the book, actually, I think I have it in front of me here. Let's see. I just want to read a passage here. Yeah, here we go. So I will read Zulu, Sotho, and then English. So it says, Mashobada owashobadela inkomo nempondo zayo. Umkhulu Thixo, kodwa hayi ngangubhungane. Sesotho, musubuhleli wa ho metsa kgomo le manaka a yona. Modimo moholo, fela ha moholo Kholabuloko. English. Mashwabata, the devourer of a cow with horns. The God is great, but is not as great as Bungane. How about that? So the poetic chronicles, they are saying that God does not surpass the beetle. And of course, somewhere here, I refer to the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the Papyrus of Ani. And there's a part that I quote, yes, where they are talking to the beetle in this particular case. And at this point, Ra is still in the primordial waters, in the cosmic egg, and they say to the beetle, they say, "Come forth from the waters and bear up this God." I mean, that's very powerful, and it is the beetle that raises the Ra that takes the Ra out of this cosmic egg, out of these primordial waters. Right? It is the beetle that teaches the sun god Ra how to roll the disc. So this book then I began now telling a story of my experience whilst I was when I arrived there in this place called Matabo in the Free State, where I was after my mother, of course, had died when I was 12. And so I got very fascinated because it was the first time in my life seeing this beetle, rolling this sphere. And this particular terrain is interesting because it's a bit of a hill. So there's a large body of water down there, and this village is a bit on top of a hill. So when you go to the water, you go downward. It's a bit of a steep going downward. Now, the cows normally they graze near the water there, and so there's a lot of dung there. And so the beetles will go there, to construct this dung ball, and then from there they have to start rolling it, and usually they have to roll against this steep hill, and when you look at it, the ball is bigger than the beetle. And another interesting thing, this beetle, when it moves backward, which is very strange. It moves in reverse, and when you look at it, even if it was to look where it is going, it would not help because its view is occluded by the sphere. The ball is too big; it can't see, so it may as well just push in reverse. So the question then becomes, how does it see? Because it will correctly reach its destination. So it uses, which is what the book is explaining, that it uses the heavens, right? There is a GPS somewhere there in the sky, you see. And then it uses that to navigate. So I think, that's what really the book is about. And one of the things that we also show there, we draw also parallels in terms of what does this dung mean? So it's interesting that the dung is also used as a medicine. For example, a dung has got hydrocarbons, for example, hydrocarbons. So we describe that concept of the hydrocarbons, the organic chemistry. The Africans are the inventors of organic chemistry, which is a carbon-based chemistry, because the Africans were actually studying about themselves, about the melanin. So it makes sense that, you got to study about the melanin, so you're going to develop the whole branch of study, of chemistry on there. And what the Basotho also used to practice is that when a woman gives birth to a child, because, she's still injured, so they would actually use the hydrocarbons from dung in order to expedite her healing. And it's interesting that now, when I did literature review, I found that actually there is an scientific interest in the idea of using methane as a therapy. But of course, the Africans have been using hydrocarbons as a therapy for a long time, So that's basically what this is about. And as I say, it is a chapter in a bigger book that will be coming out once it's completed.
Interesting. And I kept showing the cover of the book, and you can see that he has Kepera, on the boat of Ra, and you can see. I'm familiar with that image, so you can see Osiris at the top and coming out of the Nun. And so I'm working on a text called Quantum Field Theory as African Heritage. And I'll be drawing a lot from, that and other African cosmologies that, in my opinion, are the foundations for what we now call quantum field theory and quantum mechanics. But that's another topic for another day. But also in dealing with Kepera, I deal with language and comparative languages. There's a Zulu name. Matter of fact, it's a woman, a famous singer out here whose father, I think, is, well, I don't know if it's a father or her mother, but one of them she's mixed, is South African, and her name is Guapale.
Okay.
And that name Guapale means to move forward, to change, and that is the cognate for heifer in ancient Egypt.
Okay.
And so it's just interesting, like that name, like people were named that as well, heifer, the dung, the word for the dung beetle. But it's also, I mean, it's a not a synonym, a homonym in the Egyptian language for, the word for dung beetle, for to occur, to change, to metamorph, to move forward, to da 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 da. And so you still see these commonalities. And I know Theophilo Benga, I wish I had my books with me, but he has a text called, African Philosophy, that was released in 2004. Well, the English version. The English version is 2004. And, he has at the beginning, when he's analyzing the Egyptian cosmological text, he takes excerpts and gives you the hieroglyphs for it, then a transliteration, and then translation, of these texts, and then he gives his commentary. And so one of them, when they're talking about the dung beetle, he gives other African examples, just like what you said, about how the dung beetle is, or just the beetle itself, is associated with the cosmos in some kind of way in a number of African, traditions.
Absolutely.
And so I want to remind the listener, if y'all have that text, to check that out as well. Okay, and lastly is this text, A Woman in the Bush.
Yeah.
I can't read the subtitle. Hold on. Yeah, Poetry of Liberation, Loveliness, Identity, and Spirituality. Can you tell us about this text?
Absolutely, yes. So A Woman in the Bush is actually about, this is actually my first set of writings. So this is contextual poetry. So we have the concept of contextual poetry. So meaning, you have a poem, and then you're going to have a contextual commentary at the end of that poem. And the contextual commentary does not interpret the poem, it merely gives a context. So, for example, right now, as you see me in this image, there's some stuff in the background which provide the context of where I am. So, and that book is the one that inspired the sacred knowledge of the desert, because there is a piece there called Venturesome Kisses, which is the one that inspires this book. So actually, I must say the first book that I wrote was called A Goodbye to My Little Troubles. And I wrote it under the name Vusi Moloi. Moloi is my mother. And then from there, the publisher, I think it was a publisher out of Arizona. It was called something like Third Millennium Publishers. And then he disappears. He doesn't pay me royalties and stuff like that. I track him down. Doesn't answer my emails anymore, that sort of stuff. So that was like, water under the bridge, So then I rewrote, actually, this book, The Sacred Knowledge of A Woman in the Bush, is really the same set of writings as A Goodbye to My Little Troubles, except that this one now I publish it in South Africa, you see. So, but I wanted to, let's see if I can get, I have it here with me. There is a book with me here. So I just want to find this piece just to share with you, the one on Yes, here we go. Venturesome Kisses, that's page 144. Now, this piece, Venturesome Kisses, as I said, inspired this book, The Sacred Knowledge of the Desert. I spent sleepless nights writing this book, inspired by this piece, Venturesome Kisses, because that's what I wrote when I was from the desert the first time. So I'll just read just a few stanzas here. So it says, on the narrow path we converged, heartwarming kisses we exchanged, blanketed by the African nightfall. In the bushy trees near the Kalahari, every kiss a sweet windfall safari. Now, you see, one of the reasons I had to write this literary piece is that living in the jungle, in the bush, and then the apartheid government used to send mercenaries, to assassinate or to abduct people. So people used to disappear. And sometimes they used poison gas. So meaning you are inside, a house or a tent, you're sleeping, and they could come underneath, they just spray this thing, and then you just fall asleep, and then you never wake up. That sort of stuff. So we're living under very difficult, conditions. It was very hard to be positive. So when I wrote this piece, I was thinking about something positive, something not related to adversity or the sad things or the tragic things that we experience. So somewhere it says, like a dew wetting the tulips, mouth-watering kisses graced the lips. A sweet kiss in the killer jungle tasted sweeter than life itself. Life-extending kisses in the bush were ended too soon by ambush. The kisses were punctuated with indelible blood when the umbilical cord snapped between brutal scissors by perils belying the path on forbidden grounds. Now beyond the great Atlantic, their hearts still crying for a fugitive of Get Get as though I'm still hooked on the memory of the past. This hook is tearing me like a fish in a hook of its own. Contextual commentary. Forbidden grounds of love cast their spell. The naivete of love sweetens the love that exists like a desert flower. Deprived of water, the flower waits underground until when the rains fall, it springs to life, knowing that the rain will soon be gone. So that is the piece. That piece is the midwife of the sacred knowledge of the desert, African philosophical transcendence. So even in my deathbed, when the nightfall is coming upon me, you must read this piece. I think when you read this piece, even when I'm dead, I will get out of the coffin box.
Yes. It's funny how certain little small things inspire many, things that are seemingly unrelated.
Yeah.
But you're able to create a spider's web that makes the connection between these things. So just going out into the desert just one day and seeing a flower now has kind of given you not only a better philosophic understanding of a certain aspect of reality, but of course it has spawned the creation of these particular texts, and and that's how it is sometimes. Okay, and my last question for the night for me, the morning for you, is Okay, this show is called Mbongi, and the name comes from the Kikongo language,
Okay.
and it describes a learning space for where the it's a like a political institution where the community gathers and the elders and everybody kind of debates and discusses, community matters. And young people come to learn how it is done and all of this, and they share and exchange, information. So we named the show this. And but I also borrowed from South Africa a phrase, and I heard you discussing it on another radio interview, and I wanted you to give us some insight. And so my first run into this phraseology again comes from Ingabani, and so that is Umuntu, Ngumuntu, and Gabantu. And I know that's the Zulu, and it's said slightly differently in I think it's your mother's language. So if you can kind of contextualize that phrase and what that means and its relationship to community and the like, and African philosophy. Okay.
Thank you very much. And I must say, we give thanks to you. We give massive thanks to you and the ancestors that inspire you. When I first saw that, I was actually blown away. I was highly energized, to say, here is the brother from the diaspora, and he's saying, Umuntu, Ngumuntu, Ngaba. That's very powerful. Really, we give thanks to that. Because, just before I get into that, I have the greatest respect for our brothers and sisters in the diaspora. Being cut off from the motherland does not disconnect their connection. They are still connected, And I must tell you, as I said, we do longitudinal studies here. There are a lot of sad things that we discover, where you find people who are born in a very rich culture, but for some reason they develop this lack of interest or lack of enthusiasm, that sort of stuff. And I have a personal experience of living in exile and dying with burning desire to reconnect to the culture, and being more than 20 years in Canada, being cut off from that culture. And I can recall that even when I came here, I was different. I was so burning for this culture. So when I saw that, that's why I'm saying, we give thanks, to the ancestors. You are the messenger of the gods. Keep up this great work, So
I appreciate it.
Sure. So coming back now to the Umuntu Ngumuntu Gabantu in Sesotho, Mutu Kimutu Gabatu. It's quite interesting. They are exactly the same in English, in Zulu and Sotho, exactly the same. Umuntu in Sesotho, Mutu, Ngumuntu, Kimutu, Ngabantu, Kabatu. And if you translate into English, it would be Umuntu, that means a human. Ngumuntu is human. Ngabantu, as a result of the humanity of others. Now, you'll hear this translation in South Africa that goes something like, you are because I am. That's a very corrupted, distorted translation, and I don't know why they allow something like that to go on, but because in the Umuntu Ngumuntu Gabantu, there is no I there. There's no I there, So that's very important. Now, the whole philosophy behind that is the concept of the collective. Basotho, they call it Sibuka, the collective. It is at the heart of that. Remember when I was describing the Basotho philosophy, and I was giving principle number 5, which was about tse, which meant lateral transcendence. So this Umuntu Ngumuntu Gabantu is about that. It's about that lateral transcendence. To say that, even if I'm born by a particular family or from a particular clan, but I am not complete without others. You see, I'm part of the clan, I'm part of the collective. So they look at things in terms of the collective. So in other words, for that philosophy, it is always about the cardinality. Now, cardinality, of course, is a mathematical concept from set theory, where when you talk about cardinality, you are actually talking about the elements of the set. You see, you never isolate the element. You are always looking at the cardinality, these many elements in the set. So in the Basotho, Zulu, Xhosa, and all other African philosophy, it is always about the group. Maybe an example of that, looking in nature, would be like if you look at the ants, for example, the ants. I remember I've always been fascinated with the ants. And I remember one time, I had just come back from Exile, actually. So I was just walking to town in North Johannesburg in Fourways, and I saw this trail of ants. They were carrying stuff, and they were going into this hole, going inside with their stuff. And then there was this particular ant. I think the luggage was a little bigger than the diameter of the hole. And it was struggling, to push it. It wasn't getting in there. And then it was struggling. Then another ant decided to leave its luggage in the queue and went inside the hole and started pulling this luggage. And eventually, while the other one was pushing, and eventually they were able to get it through. And then from there, it came now to collect its stuff to go inside. See, that's Umuntu Ngumuntu Gabantu. That is the philosophy. That what gives meaning to our lives is because we are a collective. We are together. And this is very important because in order to defeat us, the English had to alienate us from our culture. They had to alienate us from our cultural names. They had to alienate us from our language, so that we could lose this concept of Umuntu Ngumuntu Gabantu, and also explaining the meaning of words there. So Muntu in Sesotho, Mutu, right? Same thing. So the word Mu describes a metaphysical state. So when you see the word Mu, is saying that the object that we are referring to, or that is associated with this prefix, is actually a real object. It's not something imaginary or fictitious. It's a real thing. It's based on reality. That's what Mu means, in both Sesotho and Zulu. And then the word Tu means a spirit. In Zulu, it means a spirit. So we've got many words like that that describes that particular spirit. So in other words, a human being, according to this philosophy, is a spirit being. Is a human being in terms of blood and flesh, but is also a spirit. That's why their main food is actually millet. That is their main food. They are supposed to eat millet. And in African culture, millet is the food of the gods. That's quite interesting. Even when we want to communicate with the ancestors, we have to make beer out of millet and offer it to the gods. And there's something interesting about that particular grain, and that is, number one, it doesn't have gluten, so it's very good for you. And then number two, it's very rich in potassium and other minerals. And as a result, And you know, potassium is very important for the function of the cell, especially, you know, the cell outside the cell, the ions, you know, it will have these these sodium ions outside the cell. And then inside the cell, then it will have these potassium ions. And then when the cell is processing some kind of input or stimulus or some raw input, so the ion channels have to open, and you have this sodium potassium pump that will pump the potassium out of the cell so that the sodium can go inside the cell. And once the stimulus is processed, then the sodium will go out, and then the potassium will re-enter the cell. And if that mechanism works well, then you know you don't have issues of blood pressure, diabetes, and stuff like that.
Mm.
And this millet is very rich in that, very rich in potassium. Another interesting thing about the millet is that it can grow under very difficult conditions, just like a desert flower. You know, if you go to the Sahara Desert, the communities that live on the, on the edges of the desert, the grain they grow there is millet, including, for example, the dragons, for example. You see, and the millet is a drought-resistant crop. You see, but what the colonizers did in Azania, they realized that Africans were resisting, their resistance was potent as a result of eating this millet. So they decided to change it, to introduce corn. Corn is not an indigenous African food. And then as a result of eating corn, they became weak now. It undermined their resistance. It undermined their spirituality, because the African gods, they do not recognize corn. So if we can refer to the grain as a currency, no, you cannot transact with the gods using corn. You have to transact with millet. So now we go into misalignment. We go out of resonance as a result of that. So this whole philosophy of Muntu, Ngumuntu, Gabantu is reminding us that you must not trust yourself. You must trust the collective. And it makes sense, because if you are to trust yourself as an individual, you could betray your survival. For example, when somebody, takes alcohol, they say, no, I'm just taking just one glass. And after they finish the glass, they say, no, I just want to take another one for the road. They'll always do that. And eventually they are wobbly, they are not able to do anything. They are out of commission at that point. Casino machine, they say, okay, if I can hit the jackpot, I'm going to solve all my problems. It is just an example of trusting self and getting betrayed in the process. Whereas the collective is the one that provides the morality, the moral code. Very important, the moral code, because you cannot build a nation without a moral code. Also, what's important is that this collective is also the institutional memory of the individual, of Umuntu. When I came back from exile, because I've been away for such a long time, a lot of details had disappeared from me. I had forgotten a lot of things. I had even forgotten names of people, that sort of stuff. But it was interesting. As soon as I connected with the clan, then they started reminding me, oh, but you remember so and so. You remember you wrote this particular document. You remember this photograph, stuff like that. So all these things are coming together because of Umuntu, Ngumuntu, Ngabantu. So that's a very powerful philosophy. Yes.
Excellent. I appreciate, I wish we could talk longer.
Sure. Thank you.
But that only means that hopefully this isn't your first time coming.
Yeah.
Excuse me, this isn't your only time coming.
Sure.
And that you will be back in the near future, and we can kind of
Absolutely.
narrow down the focus of the talk. And so
Absolutely. Absolutely.
we
I
learned a
will be very
lot.
excited to come back. I will be very excited to come back. And
Yes, yes.
I also envisage us collaborating. As I said, I'm running a research institute here, kind of isolated here. I would like to plug in and connect. We collaborate.
Oh, no
Uh,
doubt.
Absolutely, absolutely. We can do great things, and we fulfill the philosophy of Ubuntu Gabat.
Indeed, indeed.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh, yes, I look forward to that. And of course, I'll be communicating with you
yeah.
via email and WhatsApp. But well, I've been sharing your website throughout the conversation. And
Thank you.
so for those of you who are watching right now, you can learn more about our guest at Zulumathabo.com. And, you'll see, I think he has a total of 8 books, correct?
Yes, more than 8.
So,
Yes, yes.
yeah. So, the 3 that we talked about today is only the tip of the iceberg. And so there's a lot more content there. You'll get to hear some other interviews, radio interviews, podcasts, and things from him there. And I just wanted to introduce at least my viewing audience, to you and the work that you do, and then bring you back on some more time so we can discuss many of the topics and things. I wanted to probably get you back on and discuss. I had someone on prior, and we're going to do something a little bit more elaborate in the near future, discussing the work of Credo Mutwa and Umuntu Credo Mutwa, and to see what your thoughts are on the work that he provided and his impact, and things of that nature. So it's we have a lot to talk about, and I want to extend an invitation back in the near future, if you have time to converse more deeply with my audience. And so I appreciate again everything that you do, and of course coming here and having the conversation with us. And I will ask the question, for people who want to purchase your books,
Yes.
Where can they find it?
Okay.
Primarily.
Sure. So we sell our books in 2 ways. We do sell our books through our institute here in Azania, but also some of our books are available through Amazon.
Okay.
And I would like, when people buy books at Amazon, they should make sure they buy directly from Amazon, where it shows Matabo University College Press. Because what we noticed is that our books were being sold by other people that we don't know, and the money is going to them, is not coming to us, that sort of situation.
Yeah.
So they just should make sure that they're buying directly from Amazon, and it shows Matabo University College Press there. That will be very great. So at Amazon, there's only 2 books there. So it is the Sacred Knowledge of the Desert, African Philosophical Transcendence, and the other one, Holaboloko, African Roots of Cosmic Genesis. So those are the 2 books there. The Holaboloko, African Roots of Cosmic Genesis is available, is a Kindle, is a digital version. Whereas the the Sacred Knowledge of the Desert, African Philosophical Transcendence, that one is available as a hard copy. Now here in our institute, of course, the Holaboloko, the book on Dung, Beetle, that is available as hard copy, as a soft copy. Yeah, hard copy. Yeah, paperback. That's what I mean to say. Yes, that's right. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And are you on social media?
Yes.
If so, where can they find you?
Yes, I'm on social media. I'm on Twitter. So that will be Zulumathabo Zulu on Twitter. That's my Twitter handle. And they
All
can
right.
also find me on Facebook, Zulumathabo Zulu as well there. I have a page there.
Mhm.
Although I must say I'm not very active on social media per se, but I am there, yes.
Yeah, I get
So,
it.
for example, whenever I publish a new blog, so I make sure that it propagates to Facebook, for example, and
Okay.
also Twitter as well. Yes, I'm also on Instagram.
Mm.
Now I don't remember what's my handle on Instagram. I think it's Zulumathabo. Yes, but
Mhm.
anyway, they can just search for me on Instagram. Then they'll find me there. But I'm more active, of course, on the publishing platform
Mhm.
zulumathabo.com. That's where I spend
Indeed.
most of my time and publishing articles there. Yeah. And then also very soon we're going to have a University
Mm.
website, because we'll be offering lectures. So we want people to know our school, Madisebo University there. And then just say a little bit that, I'm a founder of this private independent university here in
Mhm.
South Africa, because we felt that the universities in South Africa were miseducating the African child. And
Mhm.
there's a number of falsifications of history that are being taught, for example. There's something called Mfetane, which they teach. And the theory behind that is that Shaka Zulu created wars, and then this displaced, nations and clans, and they scattered all over the place, and as a result there was genocide. But
Mm.
actually, through our research, we found that uh, this Mfetane is an invention of a white guy, right?
Mhm.
A guy called Eric Walker in his book South African History. And then there was another guy called Phil who creates this theory, this thesis, this this doctrine of history. And
Mhm.
what, as we do more research, we found that actually what was happening is that there were slave trades that resulted in the genocide of the Africans. And so they invented this doctrine of history in order to cover this, this genocide that they committed against the Africans.
Mm.
When you read South African history, our history, for example, starts in 1652, the official textbooks. They do mention Vasco da Gama in 1497, but then from 1498 to 1652 is you enter a void.
Mhm.
History books don't tell you what is happening. But actually, South Africa was a Portuguese colony, actually. You see,
Mm.
Vasco da Gama in 1497. So it was a Portuguese colony. The Dutch only arrived here in 1652. And in fact, there is a railway line that was created from Mozambique to
Mm.
Pretoria. This is before, of course, the English. So that particular railway line, it was called Delagoa Bay. Delagoa Bay is in Mozambique.
Mm.
You see, so these slave trades were happening from the Portuguese side, as well as the English and the Dutch and the Voortrekkers. You see, and a lot of our people were massacred, displaced. That would be the correct history, not
Mhm.
blaming something on Shaka Zulu, which is not actually what happened. You see. So
Mm.
the falsification of history is very much part of the academia in South Africa. And I can understand the reason why. That's because they have dispossessed the African natives of the land. So somehow they have to justify this, or they have to pacify, because this dispossession that has not been resolved, by the way, creates a state of antagonistic contradictions. And so the university institution in South Africa, the school system in South Africa, produces this ideology that is supposed to pacify the African, so that the African can believe the unbelievable and accept the unacceptable. That's where we are. So we decided then to establish our own institution. So our institution is not a government institution. It's not part of the government. We don't even receive money from the government. So we have to struggle ourselves how to do this. So, I mean, for example, at the end of the month, we have anxiety about paying rent. Maybe we'll be kicked out that we didn't pay rent or something like that. But that is a reality, and we are happy with that, to struggle on our own like that, as an architect of destiny, you see, so that we can teach the correct history. So metaphysics, for me, is extremely important. Metaphysics, because metaphysics is the scientific study of reality. So very important. Yeah.
I appreciate it, and have to talk more about that. When you come back, and how people can be a part of it.
Thank you.
And so with that, I appreciate you again. I give thanks to the ancestors and
Thank you.
Who saw that our paths should cross, and you shared a lot with us, and I will be rewatching this and taking valuable notes and meditating on certain concepts and things, and then prepare for our next engagement. And so with that said, well, hold on. This is my social media links. So you can find me on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, and of course on YouTube. And if you want to support the channel, you could give a gift at the $ asarimhotep for CashApp, or again, you can be a part of our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/asarimhotep. And so with that said, y'all have a blessed evening, night, or morning, and I will see y'all next time. Hotep.